Hi, everybody. Jonathan Eisenzoff, founder of TalkMap, and was out in San Francisco last week visiting some friends, colleagues, some investors, and played around of tennis, which was really fun at the old Bay Club where I used to walk down from Pretoria Hill every day to play. And man, San Francisco is so back. I had a few people ask me, "Hey, tell me what you thought. How are things going? Give me an update." So I figured I'd just share it with everybody. Some of you might know I moved to Lake Tahoe from San Francisco around 2020 during COVID, and the reason we did that is it was just San Francisco was a tough place to live. Everything was closed down. There was poop and crime everywhere, but the place is so back. It's come back over the past couple of years, but last week, the place is buzzing with energy. There's young people everywhere. People seem excited. You can feel the energy in the air. And I think some of that has to do with just, us getting over COVID. And certainly some of that has to do with one of, the latest tech cycle in the Bay Area, which is AI, which is probably the biggest, yes, definitely the biggest cycle I've been alive for. And, it's the biggest concentration of talent and capital in one place for tech. There's just no other place like it in the world. And I think it's the only place in the world where you can be a tech guy, you can start a company, and then become a VC. Like that just doesn't happen very often on the East Coast, right? You're either a finance bro or you're a tech bro, and you sort of stay in your corner. But I think that's a really fun and unique thing about the Bay Area, which I really like. Talent, someone asked me about, AI talent and developer jobs going away and things like that. Keep in mind that the Bay Area is a bubble, right? So what I'm going to talk about doesn't necessarily apply to outside of the Bay Area or other places in the country or the world, but that's where tech starts. So I think the things we see there we'll see happen eventually across the world. As far as tech talent goes, I think right now there's a little bit of an oversupply of software engineers. But there's definitely an undersupply of engineers that are really good at using AI tools. So, I'm talking about like 100 engineers. So like an average engineer or a senior engineer, you give them Claude Code or Cursor or something like that, and they're immediately like 100x more productive. There's just not enough of those people to go around. So that's a rare talent. And of course, AI researchers, so specifically AI PhDs. So, I think the floor comp on an AI scientist these days in the Bay Area is probably around $10 million a year in total comp, and that's probably on the cheaper end. It's so crazy that, Sequoia and other VCs, are recruiting straight out of Stanford AI department before folks even are able to finish their PhDs. And these small research lab type companies are becoming unicorns without a product, barely a team. And that's just, it's probably not sustainable in the long term, but it definitely reflects the shortage of expertise and the desire to ring fence that expertise as early as possible. So that they can get swooped up by the big research labs and the big tech companies. I think that'll change over time as the techniques become more widely known, but that's just how it is right now, and it's sort of a crazy time. One of the things that I've been thinking about probably since the end of 2022, I think it was, when ChatGPT came out, and the thing that blew my mind was really Whisper, because my background is speech recognition and call center technology. So, when I saw Whisper come out from a team at OpenAI that didn't necessarily have tons of speech recognition background from a research standpoint, but they basically just went for it using a new method, and it was better than anything that had come before by orders of magnitude. Like, I knew the world was going to change at that moment. And it seems like there's something new and revolutionary every week. It's just impossible to keep up with. But thinking about tech moats for startups, it's an interesting thought experiment. Now, it used to be you build a team, you raise capital, you build a product, you get your product market fit, you get traction, and you have a couple years to build, and there's always going to be people that copy you, and some of your IP patents maybe protect you a little bit, but for the time being, at least, I think tech moats are sort of dead, at least from a traditional sense. And I'll sort of walk you through my thoughts, and this is still evolving in my mind. And so I'll juxtapose a few different sides of this. So when I think about, at least in voice AI, companies like DeepGram, who has probably the leading speech recognizer, or somebody like 11 Labs, when you listen to their text-to-speech versus anything else, it's just pretty amazing. But there's other really great startups in those spaces too, so I really don't want to take away from those. But if I just think about those as like in the number one spot for now, I mean, they work really, really hard to get in the lead and stay in the lead, and you have all these companies chasing them. Is there something that they have that nobody else has that they can't get in 12 months? So if DeepGram and 11 Labs just stopped innovating, probably they would lose their position in 6 months. That's how fast things are moving. So when we think about tech moats, that's a really expensive thing to be able to maintain that tech moat if you're in a leading position. And also, hypothetically, any kid in the basement could take a research paper and some code and sling something together that's pretty good or pretty close. And we see that with the open source models, right? Every time there's a new model release that everybody's like, wow, that's amazing. It seems like within a week or two, there's a Chinese lab, or less often, university lab, but usually within a couple weeks, there's the follow-ons that are almost as good, not quite as good. So it's really hard to imagine a world where you have 2 years. I mean, it's definitely possible in the AI world right now. I don't know. I think it's pretty tough. I was looking at a post from SaaStr. It was based on I'll put it up on the screen, based on some data from Andreessen Horowitz. And, talking about tech moats and speed. And this is a graph that's looking at the ARR ramp for enterprise generative AI startups in year one. So basically what this data is showing us is that the speed to get to 1 to 2 million ARR, companies after Gen AI are moving twice as fast as they were before Gen AI. So it's definitely quantitatively sped things up, at least from the data that A16Z put together. So I think that's probably true. On the flip side, though, are there moats at all? Can you have a moat as an AI startup, and what would those things be? Well, maybe it's not the traditional way we think about what tech moats used to be or product moats used to be. Maybe it's, let's just go through a few things. Like, is it possible to have a data moat for an AI company? Yeah, I think it is. I think if a company has access to data that nobody else has access to, and those other companies have no way of getting access to that, a lot of this data that's really, really valuable, and we see this at TalkMap too, like the data that our system has processed, the companies that have processed that data, and the data that remains locked up in those organizations, almost nobody has access to, right? So if we think about TalkMap, the data that TalkMap has access to and is that nobody else probably has ever had access to, that can be a valuable moat, I think. And there's a lot of data left to be unlocked by corporations. I guess we'll see if they decide to license that data or not. But that data is really valuable to large enterprises too, right? So they don't want that data getting out usually. I think another mode is probably capital. So with things moving so fast and top tier AI researcher talent being so high, you really can't grow and compete and create any kind of a moat without a lot of capital behind you. And so I think that's why we're seeing a lot of concentration of capital in the largest AI companies. And there's definitely small AI companies starting up and getting a lot of capital too. But I think a talent moat is definitely one of the primary moats, for those companies that do have capital and who have access to data. Talent is probably one of their moats. And that's why those kind of positions, the total comp is just so high. IP moats, like intellectual property and patents and stuff like that, I don't think that's means as much as it used to. I think that there's been consensus on that for a few years. And, again, other smaller labs or Chinese labs that are introducing models that are almost as good for free, I mean, that really creates an interesting dynamic. Like the Kimi models or the Quen models, those are free and they're really good. Another interesting example, and I'll put this up on the screen, is I'm sure many of you heard about Claudebot. So this was sort of a tongue-in-cheek on Claude Code, which I use along with Cursor and other products like Codex to write code. Love Claude Code, but there's multiple people that worked on this, but the primary developer, like this thing took off last week. Within a week, this thing rocket shipped, and it's an open source application. I'm sure it's going to be a commercial company now. But this thing rocket shipped over, 80,000 stars on GitHub in a week. And that's just insane. And apparently it had enough disruptive force at Anthropic that I have a feeling the author got a call from Anthropic and said, hey, change the name from Claudebot to something else. And so they recently, just I think in the past day or two, changed it to Moltbot, which is sort of funny, tongue-in-cheek. But tech moats, it's an interesting idea. I hope that there will be a future that we'll find other ways to create startup moats that's not just data, capital, and talent. Hopefully it'll be some other things, because I think if that continues, then there's only a few companies that can even really compete. But as we saw with Claudebot, I mean, a little creativity and the right timing, and those things can definitely still happen, which is really cool. The next thing I wanted to talk about, I talked about San Francisco, I talked about talent a little bit. I talked about tech moats, and tech moats is still something I'm thinking about. I also wanted to talk about the pace of AI, and then talk about sales and marketing a little bit. I also wanted to talk about implementation, and then finally voice AI, which is near and dear to my heart. But thinking about pace, it's really hard to explain this to people that don't live inside the Silicon Valley bubble. And I think people that are not in the bubble just don't believe me and think I'm crazy. It reminds me of when, I think it was 1997, 1998. I was still in college and the web was starting to take off, and people working on the web just knew that this was going to explode. And one of the jobs I had while I was still in college, I build websites, write CGI code, go door to door trying to sell websites to businesses. And it was so weird because nobody knew what I was talking about. They didn't know what the web was. They thought I was crazy. I knew that it was going to explode. I think the people working on it knew. And I feel like it's the same way now with artificial intelligence. I know for sure in my bones and the people that are working on this, we can see exactly where things are going to go to some extent. I'm sure there's going to be lots more surprises, but um, the pace of AI is just so fast that it's not only hard to explain to people, it's hard to just keep up and know where things are going to go long term. I'm going to play a clip from Alex Karp, who's CEO of Palantir. I think he said it best at Davos last week.
I think like with a lot of our companies, it's like we can take out in the area we go in up to 80% of your cost and improve your top line dramatically. But it really depends on the use case.
Okay, so it's funny because Alex just said sort of casually, like he does, that, he might go into a company, take out 80% of the cost, increase their top line revenue. And doing that used to take a year and now could take a week. Even if he's stretching those metrics a little bit, I'm seeing the same thing. And it's just crazy. And you show it to people, you talk about it, people don't believe you. And then you show it to them and then they still don't believe you. And then eventually some of them get it and they're like, holy crap, this is real. But that pace, things are moving faster. I think technology right now is moving faster than society can adapt. And it's just challenging from for builders, for buyers, and for sellers. That just makes things tough. And the pace and the toll that's going to take on the people working on it, I worry about that a little bit. I mean, when Claude Sonnet 3.5 came out like 3 years ago, it blew my mind. And that's when I was like, everything's going to change again. I thought Whisper was going to change everything, and now we have this, where you can deploy code to write code. And cranking 10,000 lines of code a day is just insane. That doesn't mean it's good code, but I mean, you can definitely do awesome things. And I hadn't been a developer for a very long time. And, since that time, since Sonnet 3.5 came out, I've been like heads down 15 to 17 hours a day, 6 days a week. I'm always tired. I always feel like I'm behind, and I know everybody else is like that too. So I just don't know if that's sustainable. What is that going to do to us? Will we ever slow down, or is it just going to speed up? With Neuralink, I don't really know. I'm running out of Ghost energy drinks though, so I can't do it forever. So I don't think the brutal pace is sustainable. We're just going to be burning everybody out. But that's sort of what's required right now if you want to be an AI company and survive and thrive, I think. Because every week, something new comes out and something important happens. And sometimes you have to respond if it's related. Sometimes you don't, but it's brutal. But you know what? It's also fun and I enjoy it. So I don't think I would be doing it if I didn't enjoy it. But long term though, when I look back, when I started the company in 2017 till now, I think even though at any time in life or the world or society, there's always emergencies that are happening and things that you have to adapt to. And I do think it's helpful and useful for founders to stay focused on their vision and stick to their guns and execute on that vision. I mean, if market forces change and there's nothing you can do about it, you may have to change that vision. It's always evolving over time. But I think just staying focused on execution, on that vision, executing with extreme prejudice, with a healthy measure of paranoia, I think is a good way to think about it. Because they are out to get you is I think the way all startups have to be. Anyway, I really do think this is probably the most amazing time to be a computer scientist. I remember being in awe of hearing speech synthesis for the very first time on an Apple II and like Foreman synthesis. And it was really hard to understand, but I thought it was so cool. I never would have thought we would be where we are today in my lifetime. So it's a very exciting time to be alive and to be working with this. But I can understand how, people that are not in the space, the kind of stuff that we talk about just sounds crazy. But I think if we frame it, to past quick evolutions like maybe the Industrial Revolution, where we went from buggies to machines, steam engines, to factories and the way that we produced things. When I think about it like that, it sort of makes sense. I think with software development, we're moving from sort of a handcrafted, artisan kind of environment to maybe more production assembly environment, and I think that's okay. I don't think that's all bad. I think it means that we can get more things done faster with less effort, so we can build more things and build things with more of the features that customers want, and I think that's a good thing. But the hardest thing that seems to be happening, at least with enterprises adopting AI, we read a lot about there's a lot of failure, like 80% failure of AI projects, and then we read some successes. But I think that's going to change over time as companies get used to working with this. I don't think it's a technology issue. There's definitely a lot of warts on the technology. There's anytime you move from something that's deterministic to probabilistic, not every business problem is suited for generative AI. Like I don't want a probabilistic system running my accounting system or running a banking core. I want the maths to always work every time. But when it comes to things like knowledge work or making decisions or synthesizing information, aggregating information, and forming an opinion, I think that it's going to be uncomfortable for a while, but that people will eventually realize that the quality and output that you can get from a generative AI model today, I don't mean like next week or next month, they're going to keep getting better. What you can get out of them right now today, as long as you give it good context and good input, it can usually give you output that is equivalent to what a human expert can do in the knowledge work areas, at least I'm involved in, which is call center. And so I think that we'll get over those humps eventually. But there's still going to be a lot of non-technical issues, like organizational issues, change management issues. I think change management is a real tough one. Anytime you're deploying anything new, people have to change the way they work, what their job is. Some people lose their job. Maybe they switch to a different kind of a job. And so, I don't know. I think we'll figure it out. From a sales and marketing standpoint, though, this is one of the other things I think about is how do you message the enterprise market where they're not totally sure. They know they need AI and it's going to change the world, but they're not totally sure how to do it. They're scared that if they do it wrong, it's going to hurt them or hurt the organization, which is valid. But things are changing so fast, like how do you message that the AI value out to enterprises? I think it could be tough. I think we should lean on case studies where there's if you delivered value, business value that's quantifiable, that is what you sell. You're selling the outcome, not the technology. I think that's always a good way to sell software anyway. And so while there's a lot of pull from the enterprise market to buy AI, I think the ones that will win are the ones that sell the outcomes, the business outcomes, and have the proof points from other customers. So I think in the short term, I don't really know. I'm trying to figure this out myself, is how do you create marketing messaging? There's so many companies, in every nook and cranny, attached to every business problem in the world. How do you stand out to buyers? I think that's challenging, and I don't know the answer to that. I want to try to figure it out. The other thing I'm also trying to figure out is what is in this new world. How does the account manager, the sales executive fit into that? Is it the same? Does it change? And what about implementation, which I'll talk about in a minute? So I think, that a couple of I would say 100% of the founders I talked to while I was in San Francisco, none of them have large sales teams. So if I think about the last time I worked on a voice AI, meaning like we used to call it speech IVR, the last time I worked at a company where we scaled a product, which we now call voice AI, from like 2 million to 200 million in revenue. I was a product owner, then I went into marketing, and then I was a seller. We had something like 50 salespeople at the company to get that level of revenue. Do we still need the same number of account managers? For large enterprises, probably. For medium, I'm not really sure. I don't know if self-service and onboarding is so easy and simple that there's enough inbound demand with good PMF. I don't really know yet. I suspect we'll still need a similar number of salespeople. Maybe salespeople evolve into playing a go-to-market role, and the large enterprise account execs who are really like executive relationship managers are still doing the same thing. I'm not really sure. I want to figure that out. At the end of the day, though, people like to buy from people they like, and I believe that's still true. So whether that's a persona that you're putting out online or in person, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But the implementation side is interesting because I don't know if there's a few consumer AI companies where you don't really need professional services. Yeah, there's consumer applications where you definitely don't need professional services or forward deployed engineers. So far, I haven't talked to an enterprise AI startup that doesn't have forward deployed engineers. So even though, let's take voice AI, the products that are out now, it used to be it would take like 1 to 2 years to build a speech IVR, and now you can do it in a few weeks. So that aside, all the founders I talk to that are AI companies selling to enterprises still have forward deployed engineers, aka professional services, but we don't want to say that word because VCs don't like it, but that's what it is. And so I think we still need people doing implementations, hand-holding, helping the customer through their change management, changes to process. You still have to probably integrate with systems. And guess what? Customers have competing priorities. And there's always internal politics that you have to sort through, and competitors and things like that. So I think that is definitely a trend that I saw. And I think that is important for enterprise startups to have forward deployed engineers to help customers through that process. Because remember, this is new and scary for them. It's fun and exciting for us, but it could be scary for them. The last thing I want to just talk about voice AI, near and dear to my heart, in call center. I think it's interesting talking to the new batch, meaning, let's say 2023 and newer. This latest batch of voice AI companies, man, there's some founders, they're just so smart, they're so driven, they're so focused, they just know they're going to win. Those are all things you want in a good founder anyway. But I think that investors like VCs and the founders, and I think they believe that voice AI is just going to automate 100%. They have this belief that it's going to automate 100% of call center calls. I have the advantage/disadvantage of this is like my third cycle with voice AI-like products in the marketplace, and we've heard the same thing, before. This is the third time I've heard this. Is the technology that much more advanced from the previous two generations that it can solve the problem? From everything I've seen right now, I think the answer is no. and I'll explain why. So right now, I don't think it's possible. And I think here's the reason. A lot of the processes that you need to automate that are happening in the contact center with those agents and managers, it's not even written down. It's tribal knowledge. So you may have some knowledge in a knowledge base. You may have like CRM systems, ERP systems, back-end systems that have data about the customer, about the products. And that fills in part of the puzzle pieces. You may also have call recordings from the call center. You may have call recordings from their existing IVR system. That gives you another part of the puzzle pieces. But I think the moment where I will say voice AI can definitely automate 100% of call center calls is going to be when there's a piece of software that you can install that, for the first, month, let's say, all it does is it watches what the human agents do. It looks at the screens they're using. It reads all the documentation. It listens to everything. It reads everything. And then when it's done, at some point when you say, okay, let's see how much you've learned, right? And then we go through like simulations. So maybe we do 100 simulated calls or chats with this system. If it can use the agent desktop as is without changing anything and go through that process, and maybe there's like some post-training that goes on, some reinforcement learning that goes on to get it so that it works well, maybe works 70 to 80% of the time, like a human agent would, that's pretty good. So if we can get a system that does that, that's when I think that voice AI can take the chair. What I mean by that is that's when a voice AI agent can sit in the chair of a call center agent and do all of that work. Until that happens, I don't think voice AI can automate 100% of calls because it just doesn't have access to the data that it needs. And I'm not aware of any company right now that has the technology to even do those things I just mentioned. I might be missing something. I know 2 companies that have some parts of it that are really interesting, and I sort of see that that's the general trajectory of where things are headed, but I don't believe any of it is actually working yet. So I understand the motivation, the desire to automate 100% of calls. I've been there before and failed several times. And so I guess I'm a little more on the conservative side. And I think there's a way for these voice AI companies to help themselves and to help their customers in that journey. So I don't think it's going to be a switch. But maybe it could be gradual, right? So maybe you're automating calls that are easy, and then you're using and this is something TalkMap's actually really good at, where you're reading through and listening to all the call center calls and reading all the chats, and you use that to inform how to improve the performance of your human agents and improve the performance of your voice AI agents. So you get a flywheel going, you get self-improvement going. I think that's probably how things are going to go. I wonder how long that's going to take. I tend to be on the optimistic side of timelines, and I'm always wrong, meaning things always take longer than I think they will. Right now, where my head is at, I think that could happen in 5 years, maybe about 5 years. I can see all the steps in my mind of all the different pieces that have to be in place. I can see how to build and architect all of those different things. So if I can see that level of detail in my mind, that's why I think it could be done in 5 years. I think there's just so much implementation work to be done by these voice AI companies to replace incumbents, like give the step up in the customer experience, that maybe some of them will get too bogged down to get to the 100%. I think that's what's happened partially in the previous cycles. Part of it was the technology just wasn't capable enough. And I think some of it is companies just got bogged down and they wanted to go to step 10, but they just got so much work and revenue and people, they went step 1 and 2 and they never got to step 10. So we'll see if anyone gets to it in the next 5 years. I think it would be really interesting. But again, I think the benchmark is show me a system that can sit down and do all the work that an agent can do 80% of the time, And then I would say yes, voice AI can replace the contact center. I know business people sort of want to do that because it would cut out a lot of cost, but I don't know, maybe we'll get there in my lifetime. That'd be sort of cool. So that's my trip report from San Francisco. Comment if you have any other questions or comments. I love debate, so disagree with me on some things if you think I'm wrong. And look forward to seeing your feedback.